The shuttle shook so hard that my teeth rattled, and the alarm above my seat blinked red without stopping. I gripped the armrest and stared out the tiny window at the massive station ahead of us, a structure so large it blocked out every star behind it. My name is Ethan Cole, and 3 days ago I was a junior translator working in a quiet office on Earth. Now I was strapped into a shuttle heading toward the most powerful group of beings in the galaxy, and I had no idea if I would make it back home. A voice crackled through the speaker. It belonged to Grace Whitfield, the woman leading our small delegation. She sounded calm, but I had learned over the last 3 days that her calm voice usually meant something serious was happening. "Hold steady," she said. "They are testing our shuttle's defenses. It is normal procedure. Do not react." I looked across the cabin at the 4 other humans on board. None of them looked worried. That worried me more than anything else. The shaking stopped as quickly as it started. The alarm shut off. Through the window, I watched as a massive door on the station began to open, revealing a landing bay large enough to fit 100 of our shuttles inside it. "Welcome," said a robotic voice through the shuttle's speaker, "to the Central Assembly of the Galactic Council. You are the 2014th species to be invited into diplomatic contact. Please prepare for arrival protocols." I swallowed hard. 2014. That number sat heavy in my chest. It meant this had happened before, over and over again, long before humans ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. 3 days earlier, I had been called into a small government building outside Washington. I still remember the man who greeted me, a serious-looking officer named Daniel Frost. He did not smile when he shook my hand. "You speak 6 languages fluently," he said, looking at a folder in his hands, "and you finished top of your class in cultural studies. We need someone like you." "For what?" I had asked. "For first contact," he said simply. I remember laughing, thinking it was some kind of joke or test, but his face did not change. He explained that Earth had been receiving signals for almost a year, signals too advanced and too structured to be anything except an invitation. The signals came from something called the Galactic Council, an alliance of alien civilizations that had existed for longer than human recorded history. "They want us to send representatives," Daniel said, "to join their society, to become one of their member species." "That sounds like good news," I said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "It depends on what they mean by member." I did not understand what he meant back then. Now, sitting in this shuking shuttle heading into their station, I was starting to understand. The shuttle landed with a soft thud. The doors hissed open, and cold air rushed into the cabin, carrying a strange metallic smell I had never experienced before. Grace stood up first, straightening her jacket, and the rest of us followed. "Remember your training," she said quietly to all of us. "Watch, listen, do not act on your own." We stepped out onto the landing platform, and for the first time in my life, I saw an alien in person. It was tall, taller than any human, with smooth gray skin and 4 narrow eyes arranged in a diamond shape on its face. It wore a long robe made of a shimmering material I could not name, and it moved with slow, careful steps, as if every motion had been rehearsed 1,000 times. "Greetings," the alien said, in a voice that somehow sounded like several voices speaking together. "I am Valith Corin, first speaker of the assembly. You are the human delegation." Grace stepped forward and gave a small nod. "We are." Valith's 4 eyes studied each of us slowly, one at a time, lingering the longest on me. I felt a chill run down my spine, though I could not explain why. "You are young," Valith said to me directly, "younger than most who come before the council." "I am the delegation's translator," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "A wise choice," Valith replied. "Words matter greatly here, more than you understand." We were led through a long corridor lined with glowing panels that pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. Other aliens passed us along the way, creatures of every shape imaginable. Some had wings folded against their backs, Some moved on 6 legs. Some floated inside strange containers filled with glowing liquid. Every single one of them stopped what they were doing to watch us pass. I leaned toward Grace and whispered, "Why is everyone staring?" "Because we are new," she whispered back, "and because word travels fast here. Every species remembers their first day in this station." The corridor opened into a massive chamber, larger than any stadium I had ever seen on Earth. Thousands of seats rose in circular rows around a central platform, and most of those seats were filled with alien representatives from what looked like hundreds of different worlds. The noise of countless conversations in countless languages filled the air, blending into a strange kind of music. "This is the Grand Chamber," Valeth said. "Tomorrow, you will stand upon that platform and complete your formal introduction to the Council. Tonight, you will rest in the quarters prepared for you." "And what happens after our introduction?" Grace asked. Valeth's 4 eyes blinked in an order I could not read. "That depends entirely on you." We were led to a small set of rooms near the edge of the station, simple but comfortable, with windows looking out over a view of distant stars I did not recognize. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time after the others had gone to their own rooms, thinking about Daniel Frost's words back on Earth. It depends on what they mean by member. Before I turned in for the night, Grace knocked on my door. She stepped inside and closed it quietly behind her. "I need to tell you something," she said, "before tomorrow." I sat up straighter. "Okay." "The instructions we were given by our government were vague on purpose," she said. "You have noticed that, haven't you?" I nodded slowly. It was true. Our briefing packet had been strangely thin compared to everything else about this mission. It told us how to bow, how to speak, how to address the council members, but it said almost nothing about what we were supposed to actually agree to. "Tomorrow," Grace continued, "there will be a ceremony. Every species that has ever joined the council has performed the same ritual, a formal acknowledgement of the council's authority over all member worlds." "And we're going to perform it too, right?" I asked. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes met mine, steady and unreadable. "Get some sleep, Ethan," she said instead of answering. "Tomorrow is going to be a very long day." She left the room, and I sat there in the silence, staring at the door, feeling a strange unease settle into my chest. I did not sleep well that night. Somewhere deep down, I think I already understood that something unusual was about to happen, something that none of these thousands of alien worlds had ever seen before. I just did not yet understand how big it would be. The next morning came too quickly. A soft chime woke me from the little sleep I had managed to get, and I dressed in the formal clothing that had been laid out for our delegation, a simple dark uniform with Earth's symbol stitched over the heart. When I stepped out into the hallway, the other 4 members of our delegation were already waiting, along with Grace, who looked as composed as ever, though I noticed her hands were clasped a little too tightly behind her back. "Today we make history," she said to us. "Whatever happens in that chamber, remember why we came." I wanted to ask her what she meant by that, but Valeth Corrin arrived at that exact moment, moving down the corridor with the same slow, careful steps as before. "The Assemblis awaits you," Valeth said. "Please, follow me." As we walked toward the Grand Chamber, my heart pounded harder with every step. I thought about Earth, about the billions of people back home who had no idea what was happening right now, millions of light years away, inside a station built by beings older than human civilization itself. I thought about my parents, about the small apartment I had left behind, about how strange it was that a translator with no military training and no political power had somehow ended up walking toward the most important moment in human history. The doors of the Grand Chamber opened ahead of us, and the noise of thousands of alien voices poured out to greet us. Every seat was filled. Every eye, every sensor, every strange alien gaze in that massive room turned toward our small group as we stepped inside. Grace glanced back at me once, just for a second, and in that glance I saw something I had not expected, not fear, not nervousness, determination. "Stay close," she said quietly, "and whatever you see me do up there, trust it." We stepped onto the platform together, 5 humans standing before an audience of thousands of alien beings from across the galaxy, and I realized, with a sudden and heavy certainty, that whatever happened next was going to change everything. The first speaker raised one long gray arm, and the noise inside the grand chamber dropped to near silence within seconds. Thousands of alien eyes, some large, some small, some glowing faintly in the dim light, remained fixed on our small group standing at the center of the platform. "Delegates of Earth," Valith Koran announced, the voice carrying easily across the massive chamber without any visible microphone. "You stand before the assembly of the Galactic Council, representing the newest species to seek membership among us. Before you may take your place, you must complete the rite of acknowledgement, as every species before you has done." A large screen above the platform flickered to life, showing images I did not fully understand at first. Rows of different alien species, each kneeling or bowing before a glowing symbol that represented the council. Hundreds of images, hundreds of worlds, all performing the same motion. "The rite is simple," Valith continued. "You will kneel before the council's emblem, and you will speak the words of submission that acknowledge the council's authority over your species and your world. Once completed, Earth will be recognized as a client member, granted access to trade routes, shared knowledge, and protection under council law." I felt my stomach twist. Client member, submission, those words had not appeared anywhere in our official briefing documents. I glanced sideways at Grace, but her face remained perfectly still, like she had expected exactly this. "Many species find the rite uncomfortable at first," Valith said, and for a moment, something that almost resembled amusement crossed its 4 eyes. "But it is a small price for the safety and knowledge the Council provides. Your species is still very young. You have much to learn, and much to gain from us." The glowing emblem appeared on the platform floor in front of us, a swirling pattern of light in shades of blue and gold. I stared at it, and for the first time, I understood exactly what Daniel Frost had meant back on Earth, in that quiet office outside Washington. "It depends on what they mean by member." "Delegate Whitfield," Valith said, turning toward Grace. "Please, begin the rite." The entire chamber waited. Thousands of alien beings, silent, watching, expecting the same thing they had watched happen 2013 times before. Grace did not move. She stood perfectly still, her hands folded in front of her, looking directly at the glowing emblem on the floor. Seconds passed. 10 seconds. 20. The silence in the chamber grew heavier with each passing moment, and I could feel the confusion spreading through the audience like a ripple across water. "Delegate Whitfield," Valith repeated, its voice carrying a slight edge now. "Please, begin the rite of acknowledgement." Grace lifted her chin slightly and spoke, her voice clear and steady, carrying easily across the silent chamber. "We will not be kneeling today," she said. For a moment, nothing happened. The words seemed to hang in the air, untranslated in the minds of thousands of listeners who had never heard anything like them before. Then, slowly, a wave of noise began to build across the chamber, alien voices murmuring in dozens of different languages, some confused, some sharp with anger, some strangely quiet. Valith's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, an expression I had not seen before. "I do not understand," it said. "Please clarify your statement." Grace took a small step forward, closer to the glowing emblem, but she did not kneel. She stood straight, her shoulders squared, her voice calm but firm. "Earth will not perform this ritual," she said. "We did not come here to submit to anyone. We came here to speak with you as equals, or we did not come here to speak with you at all." The murmuring in the chamber grew louder, sharper. I saw several alien delegates rise from their seats, some gesturing wildly, others simply staring in stunned silence. I felt my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone around me could hear it. "This has never happened," Valith said, and for the first time, its many-layered voice lost some of its calm composure. No species has ever refused the right. Every world that stands as a member of this council has performed it. It is not a request. It is the price of joining our society. Then perhaps, Grace said, we are not asking to join your society in the way you expect. A new voice rang out across the chamber, sharp and commanding, cutting through the murmuring crowd. I turned to see another alien rising from a raised platform on the far side of the chamber, taller than Valeth, with dark red skin and eyes that glowed like burning coals. This is an insult, the alien said, its voice deep and threatening. I am Kalen Dros, speaker for the outer provinces. This human delegation mocks the traditions of this council before the eyes of every member world present. Such disrespect cannot go unanswered. We mean no disrespect, Grace replied, turning to face Kalen directly. We simply do not kneel. Not to you, not to any power. This is not about tradition. This is about who we are as a species. Who you are, Kalen repeated, his glowing eyes narrowing, is a species that has existed among the stars for less than a single generation. You know nothing of the dangers that exist beyond your small world. The Council's protection is not a gift given lightly. It is earned through respect. Then we will earn your respect a different way, Grace said. The chamber erupted into chaos. Alien voices shouted over one another, some in support of immediate expulsion, others curious, watching with what almost looked like fascination. I stood frozen at Grace's side, trying to process everything happening around me, when I felt a strange sense of pride mixing with my fear. I thought about the history I had studied back on Earth, stories of nations and peoples who had refused to bow to conquerors far more powerful than themselves, who had chosen difficult freedom over easy submission, again and again throughout human history. I began to understand, standing there in that alien chamber, that this refusal was not a mistake or an accident. It was exactly who we were. Valeth raised both arms, and slowly, the noise in the chamber began to quiet, though the tension remained thick enough to feel in the air. Silence, Valeth commanded. This is a matter for the full council to decide, not for shouting and disorder. The chamber settled into an uneasy quiet, though I could still hear murmurs rippling through the crowd, and I could feel thousands of alien eyes still fixed on our small group standing at the center of the platform. Valeth turned to face Grace directly, its 4 eyes studying her with something between confusion and calculation. Delegate Whitfield, it said, I must ask you plainly, do you understand what you are risking with this refusal? Species that have been classified as unaligned, those who reject the authority and protection of this council, are considered a potential threat to galactic stability. Such classification carries severe consequences. We understand exactly what we are risking, Grace said. We simply believe there is a difference between seeking peace and accepting submission. We are prepared to discuss trade, cooperation, shared knowledge, even mutual protection. What we are not prepared to do is kneel before any power and call it partnership. Kalen Dros let out a sound that might have been a laugh, sharp and humorless. Then you have already chosen your fate. No species survives long outside the Council's protection. There are threats in this galaxy far beyond your imagination, threats your small world has never faced. Then let us face them as free beings, Grace answered, rather than as subjects. I watched Valeth's expression shift, the 4 eyes narrowing slightly, as if it were seeing something entirely new for the first time in what might have been centuries of service to this council. It turned away from us and addressed the wider chamber. The council will convene in emergency session to determine the appropriate response to this unprecedented refusal, Valeth announced. The human delegation will be given 72 hours to reconsider their position. Should they continue to refuse the right of acknowledgement, Earth will be formally classified as unaligned, and appropriate measures will be taken to address the potential risk this poses to galactic order. The chamber buzzed with renewed conversation as Valeth's words settled over the crowd. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest at the phrase appropriate measures, though I did not yet fully understand what that would mean. Valith turned back to Grace one final time before the session ended. "I hope, for the sake of your world, that you reconsider," it said, and this time, something in its voice sounded almost like genuine concern rather than authority. "You are a young species. You do not yet understand the true scale of the dangers that surround you." "Perhaps not," Grace replied. "But we understand ourselves, and that is worth more to us than safety bought with submission." As we were led back through the corridor toward our quarters, I finally found my voice again. "Did you know this would happen?" I asked Grace quietly, "before we even landed." She glanced at me, and for the first time since we had arrived at the station, I saw a flicker of something almost like sadness cross her face. "I hoped it would not come to this," she said. "But yes, Ethan, Earth's leadership decided long before we ever boarded that shuttle. We were never going to kneel. Not today. Not ever. The instructions were vague on purpose, because some decisions cannot be written down. They have to be lived." I thought about the 72 hours we had just been given, and the phrase appropriate measures echoed in my mind like a countdown clock. Somewhere far behind us, in a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable star, billions of people had no idea that their entire future now rested on the choice their government had already made. We would not kneel. And as we walked back through that long, glowing corridor, surrounded by thousands of alien eyes still watching us with a mixture of fear, anger, and something that almost looked like respect, I understood that the next 72 hours would decide far more than just the fate of 5 humans standing on a strange station light years from home. They would decide the fate of an entire species. The 72 hours passed faster than I ever thought possible. We spent most of that time locked inside our quarters, receiving updates through a secure channel that connected us back to Earth. I barely slept. Every few hours, Grace would step out to speak with officials back home, and every time she returned, her face grew a little more tired, a little more determined. On the final day, Valith Karun came to our quarters personally, without the usual formality of an escort or announcement. The first speaker stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. "The Council has reached its decision," Valith said. "Earth's continued refusal has been noted. A demonstration fleet has already been dispatched toward your solar system." My stomach dropped. "A demonstration fleet," I repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means," Valith said quietly, "that the Council intends to show your species the true scale of the power you are refusing to acknowledge. It is not meant to destroy, it is meant to convince. This has worked on every species that has doubted the Council before you." Grace's expression did not change, though her hands tightened slightly at her sides. "And if it does not convince us," Valith's 4 eyes lowered slightly, an expression I had come to recognize as something close to regret. "Then I fear for what comes next." The first speaker left without another word, and the silence that followed felt heavier than anything I had experienced since arriving at the station. I turned to Grace, my voice barely steady. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "we wait, and we trust the people back home to do what they have already prepared to do." I did not understand what she meant until 3 days later, when we were allowed limited access to a communication feed showing real-time reports from Earth's solar system. What I saw changed everything I thought I understood about my own species. The demonstration fleet arrived at the edge of our solar system, a formation of alien warships so massive that a single one of them could have swallowed entire cities whole. Reports described the fleet's commander, a broad-shouldered alien named Doran Vex, opening a communication channel toward Earth's defense forces, expecting the usual reaction of panic, surrender, or desperate pleading. Instead, he received silence. Not the confused silence of a species too frightened to respond, but something else entirely. A calculated, deliberate silence that unsettled even the alien officers monitoring the exchange. Earth's combined defense fleet, smaller and far less advanced than the alien formation approaching them, did not retreat. It did not scatter in panic. Instead, according to the reports, it repositioned with a precision that suggested careful, rehearsed planning, spreading out along multiple defensive lines rather than gathering into a single, vulnerable cluster. I later learned the name of the human commander overseeing this response. Daniel Frost, the same officer who had recruited me back in that quiet office outside Washington, had been given command of Earth's combined defense forces the moment our delegation left for the Council Station. It made a strange kind of sense to me now, remembering the seriousness in his eyes when we first met. Doran Vex sent a second message, this time more direct, warning that any hostile action from Earth's forces would be met with immediate and overwhelming response. Daniel Frost's reply, recorded and later shared with our delegation, was short and calm. "We are not being hostile," he said. "We are simply not moving. You are welcome to demonstrate whatever you came here to demonstrate. We will be here, watching, and we will remember everything you do." I remember reading those words and feeling a strange chill run through me, not from fear, but from something closer to awe. The alien fleet began its demonstration 2 days later, powering weapons capable of destroying entire moons, firing warning shots that lit up the space between their ships and Earth's defensive line with blinding streaks of energy. It was meant to terrify, to remind humanity of exactly how small and fragile our young civilization truly was compared to the ancient powers of the galaxy. Earth's fleet did not fire back. It did not retreat either. It held its position, absorbing the show of force with what the alien reports later described as unsettling discipline. What the Council fleet did not expect happened on the third day, as Doran Vex's fleet began repositioning for a closer approach toward Earth itself. A signal was intercepted, something Earth scientists had prepared in advance without informing the Council of its existence. A coordinated network of small defense satellites, hidden and dormant throughout the outer edges of the solar system, activated simultaneously, creating a web of interference that scrambled the alien fleet's long-range sensors and communication systems. It was not an attack. Not a single weapon was fired by Earth's forces during the entire encounter, but for nearly 6 hours, the most powerful fleet the Council had sent in over a century found itself effectively blind, unable to coordinate properly, unable to fully understand the defenses surrounding the world they had come to intimidate. I later learned that this tactic had a name among Earth's military planners. They called it the Quiet Storm, a demonstration not of aggression, but of capability and patience, proving that humanity could not be easily overwhelmed, blinded, or rushed into panic, even when facing overwhelming force. When the alien fleet's systems finally cleared, Doran Vex reportedly sat in stunned silence for several minutes before opening a final communication channel toward Earth. "Your species is either remarkably brave," his message read, according to later reports, "or remarkably foolish. I have not yet decided which." Daniel Frost's reply became something of a legend among the officers who later spoke of that day. "Perhaps we are both," he said, "but we are not afraid, and we are not moving." Back on the Council Station, the news of this encounter spread quickly through the corridors and chambers, carried by whispered conversations between alien delegates who had never imagined a young species could withstand a demonstration fleet without either surrendering or being destroyed outright. Valith Korun came to our quarters again that evening, and for the first time since we had arrived, the first speaker looked genuinely shaken. "Your fleet did not fire a single weapon," Valith said, almost to itself. "And yet you have unsettled an entire demonstration fleet more thoroughly than species who tried to fight back with everything they had." "We are not interested in fighting you," Grace said. "We are interested in surviving as who we are, without pretending to be something smaller and weaker than we truly are." Valith was quiet for a long moment, studying Grace with those 4 narrow eyes. "There are those within the Council who now believe your species should be eliminated entirely, before your defiance spreads dangerous ideas to other member worlds who have long accepted the right without question." A cold feeling settled over me at those words, but Grace did not flinch. "And what do you believe?" she asked. Velith did not answer immediately. Instead, it turned toward the window, gazing out at the distant stars scattered across the endless black of space. "I have served this council for over 3 centuries, Velith finally said. "I have witnessed the rite performed 2013 times by species stronger and weaker than your own, species who came before us with fear in their eyes and submission already prepared in their hearts. I have never once witnessed what I witnessed today. Is that a good thing?" I asked quietly, "or a bad thing?" Velith turned back to face us, and for a brief moment, something in its expression softened into what almost looked like curiosity, or perhaps even hope. "I do not yet know," it admitted, "but I intend to find out." Over the following days, word spread rapidly across the station about the demonstration fleet's failure to intimidate Earth's defenses. Delegates from dozens of other member worlds began requesting private meetings with our small human delegation, curious, cautious, and in some cases, openly supportive of what they were witnessing for the first time in centuries. One such delegate, a quiet, insect-like being named Ferrix Tal from a world called Orvith, approached us during a brief recess between formal sessions. "My people performed the rite 300 years ago," Ferrix said, its many small eyes reflecting the dim light of the corridor. "We were told it was the only path to safety in this galaxy. We have followed the Council's rules ever since, without question, without complaint." "And has it brought your world peace?" Grace asked gently. Ferrix hesitated, its antennae twitching slightly. "It has brought us safety from outside threats," it admitted, "but we have little say in matters that affect our own world directly. Our voice within this council carries far less weight than those species who joined earlier, or those who submitted more completely." "That does not sound like true peace," Grace said. "That sounds like a different kind of cage." Ferrix did not respond immediately, but something in its posture shifted, a subtle straightening that suggested Grace's words had struck somewhere deep. "There are many of us," Ferrix finally said, "who have begun to wonder if there might be another way. Watching your species refuse and survive that refusal has given some of us hope we did not know we still carried." Not every reaction was as hopeful. Kalen Dros, the speaker for the outer provinces who had spoken so harshly against us during our first session, requested an emergency meeting of the full council 2 days later, demanding immediate and severe action against what he called humanity's dangerous defiance. "If we allow this species to continue refusing our authority without consequence," Kalen argued before the assembled council, his voice booming across the chamber, "we risk unraveling centuries of order and stability. Other worlds may begin to question their own submission. We must act decisively, before this defiance spreads like a disease throughout the council." His words were met with a mixture of agreement and open disagreement, the chamber splitting into visible factions, for what I later learned was the first time in decades. Some delegates nodded firmly along with Kalen's warnings, while others, including Ferrix Tal and several other quieter species, remained notably silent, their body language suggesting careful, private disagreement they were not yet brave enough to voice aloud. Velith Karun stood at the center of this growing divide, tasked with maintaining order within a council that suddenly seemed less united than it had been in centuries. "The council will reconvene in 3 days to determine Earth's final classification," Velith announced at the end of that tense session. "Until then, all parties are instructed to remain calm and to avoid any further provocative action." As we walked back toward our quarters that evening, I noticed Grace watching the various alien delegates we passed with careful, thoughtful eyes, as if she were quietly counting allies and enemies alike. "Do you think we can convince them?" I asked her. Grace was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I think," she said slowly, "that for the first time in a very long while, this council is being forced to ask itself a question it has avoided for centuries." "What question?" She looked at me, her expression steady, despite the exhaustion clearly weighing on her. Whether peace built on submission was ever really peace at all. I did not sleep well that night, my mind replaying everything I had witnessed over the past several days, from the silent defiance in the Grand Chamber to the quiet courage of Earth's defense fleet, standing firm against overwhelming force. Somewhere far above us, in the endless dark of space, an entire galaxy was beginning to watch humanity a little more closely, and I understood, lying there in the dim light of our small quarters, that the next 3 days would determine far more than just Earth's official status within the Council. They would determine whether an ancient system built on submission could survive the arrival of a species that simply refused to kneel. The 3 days passed with a tension I could feel pressing against my chest every time I walked through the station's corridors. Delegates from other worlds watched us more openly now, some with curiosity, some with quiet respect, and a few with open hostility that made me walk a little faster whenever I passed them alone. On the morning of the final session, Valith Korin arrived at our quarters earlier than usual, its expression unusually tense. "There has been a development," it said. "Kalen Dross has requested that you, Ethan Cole, address the Council directly before the final vote takes place." I felt my heart stop for a moment. Me? Why me? "He believes," Valith said carefully, "that questioning the delegation's youngest and least experienced member will reveal weaknesses in your species' position. He intends to use your answers against Earth's case." Grace turned to look at me, her expression calm but serious. "You do not have to do this, Ethan. We can refuse the request." I thought about it for a long moment, my mind racing through everything I had witnessed over the past week. The silent refusal in the Grand Chamber, the demonstration fleet that could not break Earth's resolve, the quiet conversations with delegates like Ferrex Tal, who had begun to question centuries of accepted submission simply because they had watched us refuse to kneel. "No," I finally said. "I'll do it." Grace studied me carefully before nodding. "Then let us prepare you properly." We spent the next several hours reviewing everything I might be asked, but deep down, I knew that no amount of preparation could fully ready me for standing alone before thousands of alien eyes, representing an entire species in a moment that could decide our future. When we entered the Grand Chamber that afternoon, the air felt different than it had during our first visit, charged with an energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. Every seat was filled once again, and this time I could see clear divisions among the delegates, some standing with arms crossed and expressions hardened, others leaning forward with visible curiosity. Kalen Dross stood at the center of the platform as Valith called the session to order, his glowing red eyes fixed directly on me the moment I stepped forward. "Ethan Cole," Kalen began, his deep voice carrying easily across the silent chamber. "You are young, even by the standards of your own short-lived species. Tell the Council, in your own words, why your people believe they deserve to stand as equals among civilizations that have existed for thousands of years before your world ever developed the ability to leave its own atmosphere." I felt every eye in that massive chamber settle on me, and for a moment my mind went completely blank with fear. Then I thought about my grandmother, who had told me stories as a child about people who refused to accept unfair treatment, who stood their ground even when the cost was enormous, simply because giving up their dignity felt worse than any danger they might face. "We don't believe age determines worth," I said, my voice shaking slightly at first, but growing steadier with each word. "Throughout our history, humanity has faced countless moments where the easier choice was to submit, to accept unfair treatment simply because refusing seemed too dangerous. Time and time again, we chose the harder path instead, because we believed freedom mattered more than easy safety." "Freedom," Kalen repeated, almost mockingly. "A comfortable word for a species that has never truly faced the dangers of this galaxy." "Maybe not those dangers," I said, finding a strength in my voice I did not know I possessed. "But we have faced our own. We have faced wars, disasters, and moments where entire nations tried to force other nations into submission. Every single time, eventually, those who refused to bow found a way to stand back up. That is not inexperience, Speaker Dross. That is exactly the kind of experience your council should value. A murmur rippled through the chamber, and I saw several delegates exchange glances, some nodding slightly, others whispering quietly among themselves. Kalen's expression hardened further. Pretty words do not change the reality of your species' vulnerability. Without the Council's protection, your world remains exposed to threats you cannot begin to comprehend. Before I could respond, a sudden alarm blared through the chamber, red lights flashing across the walls as Valeth Korin's voice rose sharply above the growing panic. "Security breach detected in the lower docking levels," Valeth announced. All delegates remained calm and in place. Chaos rippled through the chamber as delegates began speaking urgently among themselves, some rising from their seats in alarm. Grace immediately stepped closer to me, her hand resting protectively on my shoulder. "Stay close," she said firmly. Within moments, a group of station security officers rushed onto the platform, escorting a smaller alien delegate whose hands were bound with some kind of restraint device. I recognized the delegate as one who had been seated near Kalen Dross during the earlier sessions. An unauthorized device was discovered near the human delegation's quarters, one of the security officers announced. It was designed to disable life support systems within a localized area. The chamber erupted into shocked murmurs, and I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. Someone had attempted to sabotage our quarters, to eliminate our delegation entirely before the final vote could take place. Valeth turned sharply toward Kalen Dross, its four eyes narrowing with unmistakable anger. "Speaker Dross, this individual has been identified as a member of your personal staff. Explain yourself." Kalen's expression flickered, just for a moment, something close to panic crossing his features before hardening back into defiance. "I had no knowledge of this action. My staff member acted alone, out of misguided loyalty to protecting the Council's traditions." "Misguided loyalty," Valeth repeated coldly, "does not explain access to restricted security systems that only a Council Speaker's authority could provide." The chamber fell into a tense, heavy silence as the accusation hung in the air. I watched as several delegates who had previously supported Kalen's harsh stance against Earth now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly reconsidering their position in light of this attempted sabotage. Grace stepped forward calmly, despite the chaos still settling around us. "This attack only proves the exact point our delegation has been trying to make," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent chamber. "A system that punishes refusal with violence is not offering protection. It is offering control, disguised as safety." Ferrix Tal, the quiet insect-like delegate who had spoken with us earlier, rose slowly from its seat, its antennae trembling slightly with what I could only assume was nervous courage. "I wish to speak," Ferrix announced, its small voice somehow carrying across the tense chamber. Valeth nodded toward Ferrix, granting permission. "My world performed the rite 3 centuries ago," Ferrix said. "We were promised safety, protection, and a voice within this council. Yet today, I witnessed an attempt to silence a species simply for refusing that same submission. If this is the true nature of the safety we were promised, then perhaps it is time this council reconsidered what safety truly means." More murmurs rippled through the chamber, and I noticed several other delegates nodding along with Ferrix's words, their expressions shifting from cautious neutrality toward something closer to open support. Valeth raised both arms, calling for silence once again, though this time the chamber quieted more slowly, the tension still thick in the air. "This attempted sabotage will be fully investigated," Valeth announced firmly. "Speaker Dross, you will be temporarily removed from your position pending the outcome of this investigation." Kalen's expression darkened with fury, but he said nothing further as security officers led him from the platform, his red glowing eyes fixed on our delegation with unmistakable resentment as he departed. Once the chamber settled into a calmer, though still tense atmosphere, Valith turned toward Grace and myself. "Delegate Whitfield," Valith said, "in light of these events, the Council finds itself divided more deeply than it has been in centuries. Some still believe Earth's refusal represents a dangerous threat to galactic order. Others now question whether our traditions have grown into something far different from the safety and unity they were originally meant to represent." Grace nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the moment settling over the entire chamber. "Then let us offer the Council a different path forward," she said. "Not submission, and not conflict, but genuine partnership between equals. Earth is prepared to share knowledge, resources, and cooperation freely with any world willing to treat us with the same respect we are prepared to offer in return. We do not ask for special treatment. We ask only for recognition as equals, not subjects." The chamber fell into a thoughtful silence, thousands of alien eyes studying our small human delegation with expressions ranging from curiosity to cautious hope. Valith Corin studied Grace carefully for a long moment before finally speaking again. "This is not a decision I alone can make," it said. "The full Council must vote on Earth's final classification. That vote will take place tomorrow, and it will determine not only your species' future within this Council, but perhaps the future of this Council itself." As we were led back toward our quarters that evening, my legs still felt unsteady from everything that had happened, from standing alone before thousands of alien eyes to witnessing an attempted attack against our own delegation. Grace walked beside me in thoughtful silence for a long while before finally speaking. "You did well today, Ethan," she said quietly. "Better than well." "I was terrified," I admitted. "Courage was never about the absence of fear," Grace said, a small, tired smile crossing her face for the first time in days. "It is about standing firm despite it." That night, I lay awake in my quarters, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling, thinking about tomorrow's vote and everything that now rested upon its outcome. Somewhere far above the station, an entire galaxy of civilizations, some ancient, some young, all bound together by centuries of unquestioned tradition, waited to see whether that tradition could survive the arrival of a species that had simply, quietly, refused to kneel. Tomorrow, we would finally learn the answer. Morning came with a stillness that felt almost unnatural after everything that had happened the day before. I dressed slowly, my hands trembling slightly as I fastened the last button of my uniform, Earth's symbol resting quietly over my heart. Grace met me in the hallway outside our quarters, and for the first time since we had arrived at the station, I saw a flicker of genuine uncertainty behind her calm expression. "Whatever happens today," she said, "I want you to know that you have already changed something here. Something that cannot be undone, regardless of the vote's outcome." I did not fully understand what she meant until we stepped into the grand chamber and saw the sheer number of delegates who had gathered, far more than during any of our previous sessions. Every seat was filled, and additional platforms had been raised along the chamber's outer edges to accommodate observers from worlds who did not normally attend council sessions directly. Valith Corin stood at the center of the platform, its 4 eyes scanning the massive crowd with visible tension. When it spoke, its voice carried a weight I had not heard from it before. "Delegates of the Galactic Council," Valith announced. "Today, we vote on a matter unlike any this assembly has faced in its recorded history. Earth has refused the right of acknowledgement, has withstood a demonstration of force without retreat or surrender, and has survived an attempt at its own destruction from within these very halls. The question before us is simple, though its implications are far from simple. Do we classify Earth as unaligned, subject to the consequences that classification carries? Or do we recognize a new path forward, one that has never before been offered to any member species?" A murmur swept through the chamber, and I felt Grace's hand rest briefly on my shoulder, steady and reassuring despite the tension radiating from every corner of the massive room. Before the vote proceeds, Valeth continued, I invite any delegate who wishes to speak on this matter to do so now. Silence stretched across the chamber for a long moment before Ferrix Tal rose once again from its seat, its small form seeming to carry more confidence now than it had the day before. I have served on this council for 300 years, Ferrix said, its voice carrying clearly, despite its small stature. I have watched countless species kneel before this assembly, myself included among them. I always believed that submission was simply the price of survival in a dangerous galaxy. But watching Earth's delegation these past days, I have come to understand something I had never considered before. Perhaps true safety does not come from submission at all. Perhaps it comes from mutual respect between equals who choose cooperation freely, rather than fear that demands it. More murmurs rippled through the crowd, and I watched several other delegates nod slowly, along with Ferrix's words. Another delegate rose, a tall being with shimmering blue skin, whom I recognized from earlier sessions as representing a distant mining colony world. I share similar thoughts, the delegate said. My people joined this council 2 centuries ago, hoping for protection from raiders who threatened our shipping routes. That protection came, but so did countless restrictions on our own governance, restrictions we accepted because we believed we had no other choice. Watching Earth refuse and survive that refusal has shown many of us that perhaps another choice existed all along. One by one, other delegates rose to speak, some in support of Earth's position, others still cautious, warning against the dangers of setting a precedent that might encourage other member worlds to challenge the Council's long-standing traditions. The debate stretched on for what felt like hours, voices rising and falling across the chamber in a complex tapestry of hope, fear, tradition, and change. Finally, Valeth raised both arms, calling the chamber back to order. The time has come for the Council to vote, it announced. Each delegate will cast their decision through the chamber's recording system. The results will be tallied immediately. I stood beside Grace, my heart pounding so hard I was certain everyone nearby could hear it, as thousands of small lights began appearing across the chamber's central display, each one representing a single delegate's vote. Blue lights for continued classification as unaligned, meaning expulsion and potential hostility toward Earth. Gold lights for a new classification Valeth had proposed, something never before offered to any species, full recognition as an equal partner, without the requirement of the right of acknowledgement. The lights appeared slowly at first, scattered unevenly between blue and gold, and I felt my stomach twist with every passing second. Then, gradually, more gold lights began appearing across the display, delegate after delegate choosing a path that no species before us had ever been offered. When the final tally appeared, the chamber fell into a stunned, heavy silence. The gold lights outnumbered the blue by a narrow but undeniable margin. Valeth Corrin stared at the results for a long moment before turning to face our delegation, its 4 eyes wide with something that looked remarkably like relief. The Council has spoken, Valeth announced, its voice carrying clearly across the silent chamber. Earth is hereby recognized as a sovereign member of the Galactic Council, granted full status as an equal partner among the civilizations represented within these halls. No further requirement of the right of acknowledgement shall be imposed upon your species, now or in the future. For a moment, I could not move, could not fully process the words I had just heard. Beside me, Grace let out a slow breath, the tension that had held her shoulders rigid for days finally beginning to ease. We accept this recognition, Grace said, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly present beneath it, not as a victory over this council, but as the beginning of a genuine partnership. Earth stands ready to contribute knowledge, resources, and cooperation to any world willing to treat us, and each other, with the same respect we have asked for ourselves. The chamber erupted into a mixture of applause, murmured conversation, and what sounded almost like relief from many of the delegates who had spoken in our favor throughout the debate. Even some who had voted against our recognition seemed to relax slightly, as if a long-standing tension within the council itself had finally begun to loosen. Valith Korun stepped closer to our delegation, its expression softer than I had ever seen it during our time at the station. "In 3 centuries of service," it said quietly, "I have never witnessed a session quite like this one. You have not simply secured a place for your own species today. You have forced this entire council to reconsider traditions we accepted without question for far longer than any of us care to admit." "That was never our intention," Grace said honestly. "We simply refused to become something we were not." "Perhaps," Valith said, "that is precisely why it mattered so much." Over the following hours, as the formal session drew to a close, delegates from dozens of different worlds approached our small human delegation, offering congratulations, curious questions, and in several cases, tentative proposals for future cooperation and trade. Ferrix Tal approached me directly, its antennae trembling with what I now understood to be genuine excitement rather than nervousness. "Your species has given many of us something we did not know we were still capable of feeling," Ferrix said. "Hope that change remains possible, even after centuries of accepted tradition." "I hope your world finds its own path forward too," I said honestly, meaning every word. As evening settled over the station, Grace and I stood together near a large observation window overlooking the endless expanse of stars stretching out beyond the council's massive structure. The chaos and tension of the past several days finally seemed to be settling into something quieter, something that almost resembled peace. "3 days ago," I said, breaking the comfortable silence between us, "I was terrified we had made the wrong choice, refusing to kneel before an entire galaxy of ancient, powerful civilizations." "And now?" Grace asked, glancing at me with a small, tired smile. I thought about everything I had witnessed since stepping off that shuttle for the first time. The silent refusal in the Grand Chamber, the quiet, unwavering strength of Earth's defense fleet standing firm against overwhelming force. The courage of delegates like Ferrix Tal, who found the strength to question centuries of tradition simply because they had watched us refuse to accept something smaller than what we truly deserved. "Now," I said slowly, "I think we proved something important, not just to this council, but to ourselves." "And what is that?" Grace asked. I looked out at the vast field of distant stars stretching endlessly before us, thinking about the small blue world so many light years away, where billions of people were about to wake up to news that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. "That we were never meant to fit ourselves into a shape someone else designed for us," I said. "We were always meant to stand as exactly who we are, even when the easier path was to simply kneel." Grace nodded slowly, her gaze following mine toward the endless field of stars beyond the window. "The galaxy expected us to arrive here frightened, ready to accept whatever terms were offered, simply grateful for a seat at the table," she said. "Instead, we arrived and asked for a seat, not a leash." I smiled at that, the exhaustion of the past several days finally beginning to lift, replaced by something warmer, something that felt remarkably like hope. In the weeks that followed, news of Earth's recognition spread rapidly across the many worlds connected through the Galactic Council. Trade agreements began forming, with civilizations eager to learn more about the young species that had refused to kneel and somehow emerged not only unharmed, but respected. Scientific exchanges opened doors to knowledge humanity had never imagined possible, while Earth, in turn, offered perspectives and ideas that many older civilizations had long since forgotten how to consider, having grown comfortable within centuries of unquestioned tradition. Valith Korun remained first speaker of the council, though its role within the assembly seemed to shift subtly in the months that followed our recognition, guiding increasingly frequent conversations about reform, cooperation, and the true meaning of the safety the council had always claimed to provide. Kalen Dros was formally removed from his position as Speaker for the Outer Provinces following the investigation into the sabotage attempt against our delegation, though rumors persisted throughout the station that he continued to hold influence among a smaller faction of delegates who still longed for the old traditions of unquestioned submission. I understood, even then, that not every mind within that ancient council would change overnight, and that the work Grace and I had begun would likely continue for generations beyond our own small contribution. As for myself, I remained on the council station for several more months, serving alongside Grace and the rest of our small delegation as Earth's first official ambassadors to a galaxy that had, until recently, known almost nothing about us. I made countless friends among species I had never imagined existing, from the quiet, thoughtful insect-like beings of Orveth to towering, gentle giants from worlds whose names I still struggle to pronounce correctly. Sometimes, late at night, I would return to that same observation window where Grace and I had stood together after the vote, staring out at the endless field of distant stars, thinking about how close we had come to a very different outcome. I thought about Daniel Frost, standing firm at the edge of our solar system against an overwhelming alien fleet, refusing to move despite every reasonable expectation that he should. I thought about the countless generations of humans throughout history who had faced impossible odds and chosen, again and again, to stand rather than kneel. I understood, standing there in the quiet stillness of that observation deck, that humanity's journey among the stars was only just beginning. We had not arrived in this galaxy as conquerors, nor had we arrived as subjects grateful for whatever scraps of safety we were offered. We had arrived exactly as ourselves, stubborn, imperfect, and unwilling to accept a future built on submission, no matter how ancient or powerful the forces demanding it. The Galactic Council had existed for thousands of years, built upon centuries of unquestioned tradition, expecting every species that entered its halls to eventually kneel, just as thousands before them had done. They had never once considered the possibility that a species might simply refuse, calmly, quietly, and without apology, choosing instead to offer partnership on equal terms or nothing at all. They had never expected humanity to refuse diplomacy built on submission. And in refusing, we had not only secured our own place among the stars, we had reminded an entire galaxy of something many of its oldest civilizations had long since forgotten. That true peace was never something to be demanded through fear. It was something offered freely, between equals who respected one another enough to stand, side by side, without ever needing to kneel.